Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Thanks for watching my video. In this video, I'll give my reading wrap up for the week of February 23rd through March 1st. I completed 2 books this week, so I give reviews for those 2 books. I read parts of 3 books, so I talk briefly about those 3 books. I talk about a Wobble I completed, and I talk about a Wobble I'm working on. I talk about my reading plans for the coming week, and I talk about some other things going on in my life this past week. The first book I completed was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This was a reread. I read it for Tia Chu's book club, moderated by Tia Chu, at Tia Chu on here. Normally I don't reread, but I decided that if I haven't read the book super recently, and if I did like it the first time, I'm going to read it. I'm going to reread it if it's a book club selection. It was a 5-star read for me when I first read it. The 2 main characters in this book are Eva and Shane. When they were seniors in high school, they had a very intense, passionate relationship that lasted a week, and then they totally fell out of contact. They didn't speak, weren't in each other's lives. They both became famous authors. Now it's about 15 years later. And they meet up at a book event in New York City. They both have a fair amount of trauma from their childhoods. In Eva's case, her mother was not a very good mother. She was just not very good. She wasn't abusive, but she was definitely hands-off. And she didn't really set a great example for Eva. In Shane's case, he was in the foster care system, and as an adult, he just doesn't think that he's good enough for anyone. Eva has the additional problem that she suffers from crippling migraines. When they meet up at this book event, it's the start of them trying to reconnect. The story goes from there. I don't want to say too much more, but this book is heavier than a lot of romances that I read. Not that they're not good too and don't have their heavy elements, but these characters both have issues that they need to work through and learn to trust each other, learn to become what they themselves can fully become. There is some graphic, spicy scenes. There is, if not exactly child abuse, emotional neglect. There is an attempted essay of a minor. The third major character in this book is Audrey, who is Eva's daughter and plays a big part in the book too. I recommend this book to anyone who would like to read a realistic romance between 2 characters who have to not only trust one another, but try to deal with the trauma of their past and become fully what they can be. As long as you take into account the issues I mentioned. I debated what to rate this. I rated it 5 stars before. Should I rate it different on a second read because I know what's going to happen? Ultimately, I rated it 5 stars again. It's a really good book. I'm glad I read it again, even though I've talked in several videos about my preference about not rereading books. The second book I completed is There by Tommy Orange. This was the February read for the I'm with the Band book club, moderated by MJ at Reading This Life at M-J on here. This tells a bunch of stories about Native Americans who live in Oakland, California. Some of the stories are told from first-person perspective, some from third-person perspective. I didn't like too many of the characters, but I was interested in their stories. There is a cast of characters at the beginning of the book, and I found that I was referring to it a lot. Even with it, I had kind of trouble to keep track of all the characters. And the other thing was the author would change time. In addition to so many characters, the story goes forward and backward in time. It wasn't always obvious until I was a little ways into the time change to realize that was what happened. Overall, I did enjoy it, and it was interesting seeing the lives of the characters. There is alcohol abuse in this. There is domestic violence. There is murder, and that is talked about unflinchingly. There is a fair amount of injury detail given. I recommend this book to anyone who would want to read a book that realistically shows what the lives of Native Americans are like living in an urban environment at this time. I should say, too, there's a lot of examples. There are examples of racism, the hurdles that Native Americans face. So I recommend this book, but just take into account the issues I talked about and make sure those aren't something that might create a problem for you reading the book. I rated it 4 stars. The first book I read part of this week is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is a serial killer romance. I'm not too far in it. I'm enjoying it so far. It is a book that has inspired widely disparate opinions, but I am enjoying it. The second book I read part of this week is The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendoline Kiste. This story centers around 3 friends from the town of Velkwood, somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember if they gave the state. Midwest of the U.S. Early in their college experiences, a group of houses, 8 houses in the part of town they lived in, something happened in that no one could get out of those 8 houses anymore, and only the 3 young women could get back in. And the story starts 20 years in the future from when that occurred. There is, when this section of houses prevented people from going in or out, or most people going in, the government first investigated it and they couldn't understand what was going on, so they basically just cordoned off the area. But there's a investigation. There's a nonprofit group that gets a grant to investigate what happened, and they enlist one of the young women who's not so young anymore. It's 20 years later, and the story goes from there. I might well be done with this book today, but I'm recording this early on March 1st. I just want to record this video. This is the February read for Fright Club, moderated by Cliff at Cliff's Dark Gems and Crits at Crits_reads. The guest host for this one is Janet Literary Love 123, who's been a champion of this book. I'm really enjoying it. I don't have much left, and I do have to be completed by early tomorrow because the YouTube Live to discuss this takes place at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I am going to be done with it. But I just wanted to record this video, so I'll give my final thoughts on it next week. The third book I read part of this week is The Complete Works of H.P. Lovecraft by H.P. Lovecraft. When I talked about this book previously, I've said that although I'm enjoying it, it's not eliciting the feeling in me that I remember from earlier reading stories. Many of these stories, it's the 4th time reading them. But I hit a group of stories that I am getting that feeling back. I'm not going to say really much, if anything, about them. I just want to name them. And it's more than just this past week. I forgot to talk about reading some of these the previous week. But those stories were the Call of Cthulhu, Pickman's Model, the High House in the Mist, the Silver Key, and the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which I'm partway through now. These stories are eliciting that feeling that made me want to read Lovecraft multiple times. Next, I want to talk what my reading plans are for the upcoming week and, in some cases, for the remainder of March. The March read for Tia Chu's book club, moderated by Tia Chu, hasn't been announced yet, so I don't know what that read's going to be. But the current read for Booked and Busy, moderated by Jamie, is currently Legendborn, which I'm a little ways through. That goes through March 17 to read that book. And then on March 18, the book's going to change to On the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is a second prequel to the Hunger Games series. So to be ready to read this book, I need to read Mockingjay, the third book in the original Hunger Games series, because I only read half of it before. Never read the whole thing, so I'm going to read that. And I also want to read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the first prequel. Which, it might be a lot reading both of them, but I certainly want to read Mockingjay. The March read for I'm With a Band, moderated by MJ, was just announced. It went up to vote, and the book is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I have not read that book. The March read from Fright Club, moderated by Cliff and Kritz, was announced also, and that is The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. Really happy about this choice because I really enjoyed A House of Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, my first book by her. So I'm happy that for a club I'm going to be reading a second of her books, a second for me. And the March-April book for The Cozy Club, moderated by Stephanie Bookish, was announced, and that is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. All these books, I want to start pretty soon, the book club books, and not allow them to slip to the end of the month. Like, once again, I did this month, although I am completing them in time, unlike last month or two when I didn't complete them all. Another thing I want to talk about is that not too long ago, a new library was built in our town. The old one was about 40 years old, and they determined it was too small. They opened it last December, but I just went for the first time this past Wednesday. The main reason I went there is that I had some CDs I want to donate to the Friends of the Library. Maybe they do this everywhere, but in our town library, they take, in addition to books, they take CDs, Blu-rays, and DVDs. But of course, when I was there, I wanted to go in. It was impressive. It was a lot bigger. It's still a work in progress. They're still doing some work inside, but the work wasn't like loud or anything like that. The bookshelves aren't all full though, so they're still doing some work. So it was really good going to the new library. I need to, when I return, when I go again, I want to even look more extensively. Of course, I couldn't go in the library without borrowing a book or two, so I did, and both the books I borrowed were YA books. I've not heard of either of them before, the authors, but they just looked appealing to me. The first one I borrowed was The Way You Make Me Feel by Maureen, and that's this book here. And I'll just say the first blurb on the back. The Way You Make Me Feel is a love letter to new friends, great food, and the beautiful and complicated bonds of family. Maureen is a master at writing stories that are both timely and timeless, to celebrate all the ways love can be found and why it's worth keeping. Robin Benway, National Book Award winner and the New York Times bestselling author of Far from the Tree. And the second book I borrowed is The Ivies by Alexa Dunne. This book here. I'll just read a few of the blurbs on the back, get an idea what it says. Emissions are killer. Tense, twisty, and oh so addictive. Emily Lloyd Jones, author of The Bone Houses and the Hearts We Sold. Timely and compelling examination of the maelstrom created when girls are pitted against the environment and each other. Laurie Elizabeth Flynn, author of The Girls Are So Nice Here. A bitter blend of privilege, high-pressure competitiveness, and murder. Jay Alley, author of Wings of Ebony. A satisfying page-turner full of surprises and dark humor. Emily Arsenault, author of All the Pretty Things. Haven't been doing a very good job reading Libby and Hoopla books I borrowed recently, but I'll make sure that I read these books. I don't really need to get more books, but I wasn't going to go into the library without getting at least a book or two the first time visiting the new one. One thing I will say, though, that the parking lot was kind of lacking. It wasn't that big. Not that many spaces. But they are somewhat sad to me, but the old library is right by the new one. They've already torn it down, so I think part of that is they're going to be putting in more parking spaces. And there is a lot behind the old library, too, which hopefully they'll make available. So next I want to talk about the Wobble I completed, and that is Bow Bow the Panda. Bow Bow came out pretty good. The only thing is I didn't quite stuff it enough. You get this package of stuffing, and you're supposed to, there's a certain amount you're supposed to stuff it. And I fell short, so Bow Bow's a little lumpy, but otherwise Bow Bow came out pretty good. And the Wobble I'm currently working on is Ken. When Ken's done, Ken's supposed to look like this. And good of the way through the body. This is where I am so far. Coming out pretty well so far. Next I want to talk about some other things that occurred in my life. If you watched my last weekly wrap-up, I talked about how we had a ice storm, brought down a tree limb, which the ice weighted the ice, which onto our lines, took out our power line, our phone line, our cable internet line. A lot of outages in the States. We got the power back in a couple of days, which was really good on the part of the power company, but when the power line got brought down, there was a surge, and that fried a board on our boiler, so the boiler didn't work. So got a temporary repair for that the next day. So that was good. But there had been kind of and I am back in my house now. I returned here last Monday. There was a problem. There has been a problem occurring for a while. An indication there's a problem. We have well water, and for those who have well water, you know that you're dependent upon a pump, and the pump was going off when there was no demand. The faucet wasn't turned on, the toilet wasn't flushed, weren't doing a load of wash, and I couldn't see any leaks, I didn't see any leaks anywhere. This is kind of going on a while, but other things were going on. I didn't deal with it. But in recent days, the pump was going off about every half hour for 25 minutes. So finally decided I need to take a look at. So called our plumbing people this past Thursday. A couple of guys came out Friday. Discovered that there was a problem with the pump, and there was a leak. It was kind of leaking back, and they needed to, and there was also a little leak in the water tank. They needed to replace the pump. They installed a new pump, which was a submersible pump, and they had to replace the water tank. They had to dig up the well to get to so they could put in the pump. They had to install some wiring. I think probably a tube. And able to do it, but it was, I won't say the exact amount, but it was high four figures, so expensive repair, and kind of a little wearied by first the problems with the power line, the phone line, cable, internet line going down, board fried. First we didn't have electricity, then we didn't have heat, and had to get this rather expensive repair. The pump was 26 years old, so I guess it doesn't owe us anything. And that just got done yesterday, so I'm kind of wearied by all these kind of things in a small time frame. There's still a couple of things I got to do to get because of the limb falling out of lines, but the remaining things aren't aren't urgent. I released the booktuber name tag video. I'm probably going to release another video, the poetry pop-up snow video, before this video that I'm recording now gets released. I did record several videos when I was at the hotel room because it was good to get a different backdrop. So those will be released gradually, maybe another 4 videos or so. And I do want to thank Pat at Book Chat with Pat 8668 and Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. They both shouted me out and said some nice things about me in the recent videos. And I did gain some subscribers due to that. I'm sure it was due to that. And I appreciate it. Thanks to you both. I'd be interested to know how your reading week went. Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.